wine in restaurants is still a daunting prospect. What if you don't know half the wine estates on the list? How do you know your sommelier isn't just trying to sell you the beverage with the highest margin? What do you do if everyone on your table is eating different things?
Today, we'll get some answers from two respected professionals from Hong Kong's wine world. Elliot Faber, the beverage manager at Yardbird, Ronin and Sunday's Grocery, and Nicol, the CEO of the wine website, Wine Times Hong Kong. But first, just for a little bit of fun, we're going to put them to the test. We've asked them to bring some pairings for 3 foods we find in Hong Kong, some of which are pretty acquired taste.
So we have our 3 dishes in front of you right now. The century egg, right over there, it's a duck egg preserved in a clay mixture. We have Cantonese style roast goose, and we have the Chinese wife cake, which is a pastry with sugared winter melon inside. So,
Elliot, what did you bring along to match?
Well, today for the wonderfully pungent century egg, I wanted to play a little bit with the pickled ginger, which I thought would be a pretty standard condiment for the century egg. And I brought the Poplar Grove Viognier, which is actually from Penticton in British Columbia, Canada. Wanted to play with the roundness of the Viognier and without the acidity being too high, just something that texturally might match with the century egg, and no fear of any sulfur notes coming out of the Viognier. I think any sulfur will come right out of the century egg.
I have to say that it's something that I'm pretty terrified of.
It's
very honest. What about you, Ali?
Yeah, it's not.
You've been in Hong Kong almost all of your life,
I
isn't
can't
it?
say that I'm looking forward to tasting it anyway at all. So.
Or
The wine,
in the name of
certainly.
magic.
I'm really excited about trying a Canadian wine because they're few and far between in Hong Kong. Viognier itself is always a difficult sell, I'm sure, as you know, and I'm looking forward to the pairing.
And what did you bring to match with the egg?
I brought a Riesling, a German Riesling from the Rheingau. It's slightly off dry, and for me, slightly off dry is probably a lot sweeter than most people think off dry is. I have a fairly sweet palate. From Prince von Hessen, a stunning winery, lovely bunch of people. I think the Riesling in Chinese food is, I don't want to use the cliche match made in heaven, but I've just done it. But, Riesling in Chinese food, Riesling is so diverse, from dry to super sweet. So you have this, wonderful spectrum of taste, like you do on any Chinese table. So I thought I'd take the Riesling. I've got to be honest, I didn't think the egg looked quite that bad, but I'm hoping that the egg won't kill the wine, because the wine is it's a fantastic wine.
I think if there's anything that's ever going to kill a wine, that's probably going to be one of the dishes that does it.
Yeah.
Sure, and
Shall
then
I taste?
Yeah, you want to go check?
Yeah,
Go
I'll
on.
taste it first.
I'll pour for you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen.
Thank you. Being the only girl here actually has its benefits.
And then while we're doing that, what are we going to have with the goose in a bit?
We're going to do a wine that comes from Sicily, the south of Italy. I think a lot of people might think of really a lot of sunshine and really kind of dark, dense fruit. Nero d'Avola as a grape, if people think of wine in Sicily, definitely comes to mind. This is actually modeled after a famous Sicilian wine style called Ceresvolo di Vittoria. It's a more fruit-forward grape called Frappato and Nero d'Avola from a vineyard from a woman named Elena Occhipinti. And instead of that kind of dark, heavy, concentrated flavor, you end up with something that's a little more floral on the nose, more cherry fruit, and most importantly, the wine is lean and light, and will kind of just support the goose and not get in the way of kind of the, I think maybe slightly gamier flavor that it might take.
People always say that it's really hard to match wines with Chinese food. Do you find that you have the same difficulty, say Yardbird or Ronin, where it's traditionally more Japanese in its concept?
Well, I mean, Canadian wine aside for the moment, and later on the Washington wine aside, I'm a firm believer in pairing Italian food with Italian wine with Japanese food. Partially because I think with both cuisines, there's a focus on simplicity of ingredients, lots of umami, whether it's like mushrooms and tomatoes and cheese in Italy, or you're working with like miso, more mushrooms in Japan, and like kombu and bonito, lots of high glutamate foods. I think that this kind of stereotypical acidity and minerality that Italian wine has a rap for, sometimes bad, sometimes good. I think it's something that really supports kind of the more savory notes that you find in
The
Japanese
Japanese
food.
make wines and they make pretty decent wines
Yeah.
too, don't they?
Absolutely, there's a couple of interesting things in Greece.
Great
Vineyard.
whites. They make fantastic white wines. The reds are on their way, but mainly from international varieties, they make some pretty decent reds. The indigenous red grapes are a little hit and miss. Let's put it that way.
But let's
what-
not. Sorry, I was just going to say, don't forget the sake and the Japanese whiskey.
Sure,
Yeah,
of
Also,
course. And
Yeah.
also natural and great beer.
Can I also say that the way that Elliot talks about the wine, I actually want to try it.
What did you
No,
bring
sounds
along
very
to
nothing.
go with the?
I brought a
the
Castel
goose?
Nuovo Tancredi, 100% Sangiovese from Tuscany.
Both broad Italian wines.
Yeah, great minds think alike. We both brought Riesling, we both brought Italian wine, so it's kind of interesting. I went with the Italian purely on, as we've already discussed, on the acidity factor. I wanted something to cut through the fattiness of the goose. Italian wines are coming into not into their fall, but they're certainly getting a lot more coverage than they used to. The focus
Worldwide
is
or in Hong Kong?
mainly, I can't speak for the rest of the world, obviously, but in Hong Kong certainly, they're becoming much more prominent on wine lists. People are beginning to understand them a lot more. I think the fascination with certain regions of France is somewhat waning.
Bye bye.
I'm not smiling because I'm happy about that. But, it's not a arrivederci, it is au revoir. So, and maybe you're not happy until we don't know. But
And it's going to be good day, mate.
well,
Coming soon.
Oh,
There we go.
Far
Don't
from now.
mention the Australian wines.
There are some great Australian wines, and it's interesting that we have all picked old world.
Backpedal. There he
Well, no,
goes.
I mean, I was wondering if Elliot was going to bring New World or Old World, and it's interesting having the Canadian on board, but 5 out of 6 Old World wines, it does say something about people's tastes within the business more so than anything else. I think that if you sit down in a regular Chinese restaurant, and if there are people there that have brought their own wine, and they're local gentlemen especially, I would say at least half the time it's Australian wine on the table.
As opposed to the old days where it used to be French. Because the French had a huge stronghold on wine in Hong Kong.
I think they still do, but the problem with the French is that there's a lot of dross down at the bottom end. Their top wines are really very good. But
One of the problems with the French.
Sorry, all right.
Start at the top.
onions, they're much different. So, do you want to try the one? Do you want to have a look at them? or-
Yeah.
Are you going to have it with
I
the
might.
eggs?
Yeah, I will try it with the egg, of course.
Should
That's
probably
what
take
it's
a
about.
big bite of the egg
Yes.
first.
I think we should just pass
I'll
the
just-
plate
yes,
over to Janice,
pass,
and you can
yeah.
keep it there. And,
I think ladies first is always
Wow.
the way to go on this.
I'll jump the cliff for this.
it's just a very strange colour. How do they get the colour, Janice? How do they-
It's the clay.
right.
Actually, so how it actually solidifies is through the denaturing of the protein, which is kind of like cooking how lemon or citrus cooks
Like
ceviche.
ceviche stuff.
So it's the same kind of idea.
It's interesting.
Here I go.
Ooh, it's a bit early in
For-
my life for this.
essentially.
Actually, not the day either.
Braver than I. So.
It's really not bad.
Oh, no, get rid of it.
Actually, no, you're going to have a try. Come
not
on, take one for the
Seriously?
team. No, it's all right.
Maybe
You
later.
like
Is that?
You want to give it a go, Eddie?
I'll go for it. I don't mind.
Fantastic.
I don't
Kind
mind,
of.
yeah.
See how
Did you
Ali's,
take,
Ali's
I'm okay
Which was-
with giving it a try. I just want to cleanse the palate with the wine first. I think,
a bottle.
yeah.
Do you know what? Yeah, try it. Try it with the wine. It's actually, it takes away
That's
the sulfuric. This is the BC
Yeah.
one. It does take away the very stringent sulfuric clay flavors.
And did you have it with ginger?
I did. I had a little bit of ginger with it. So if you don't mind, you can try mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
You are.
Yeah, that's
But yes, this flavor of the egg does just kind of stick in your mouth, whereas the ginger acts to cleanse it out. Like even after a sip of that,
yeah. It brings on like a really savory character actually, and almost cheesy.
Yeah.
Like, it's really.
There's
it's
a
really
nice
actually-
roundness to it. There's a nice.
You gotta
taste.
do it.
Yeah.
Still
You
not
gotta
right,
do
too.
it.
The creaminess of the egg is actually quite nice, especially with the wine. Even if you can't appreciate the initial kind of shock of the sulfur or the whatever it's in it, that actually kind of rounds it off really nicely. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
I got to say, we published a story last week about wines you can drink for breakfast, and eggs were part of the story, but
Not these eggs.
I just don't think you can. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people eat on appearance a lot of the time, and
Well, yeah, I
if you
mean, the
don't-
visual is important.
Aroma and appearance. So
Sure.
Are you gonna try? It's
I'm-
pretty surprising.
I'm going to have
actually.
2 out of 3. I think I'm going to go with the goose and the dessert actually to be
Well,
right. Let's
all right.
move on
All
to
right,
the goose.
Yep.
right,
Okay.
I'll get pouring. So this is 2 Italian wines,
Yep.
which is kind of interesting.
And while you're doing that, let's chat about wine lists in general and the importance of pairing. I know we've chatted previously about this, and I don't think you hold as much stock as chefs and perhaps sommeliers do in how food and wine should actually pair to make for a good experience. What do you think, Ali?
You know, I think that there's a lot of pressure put on restaurants to pair food and wine together. I come from a Western upbringing, albeit here in Hong Kong, so there was always wine on the table. My parents, I don't think, ever really cared what they were drinking when they were eating. They were eating and drinking. I think there's a lot of focus these days on trying to get everything perfect, and I feel that's impossible. I feel that the overall experience is what you're looking for, not necessarily how one wine goes with one dish. You know, we touched earlier on different foods on tables with one bottle of wine and 4 people.
Exactly. Yeah. One's
it's
eating
tough argument
fish,
these
one's
days.
eating
Yeah.
steak. What do you do? How do you order the wine?
I think it's just the best companion for wine is good companionship. Really, at the end of the day, it's not. It is cliche, but it's a fact. Really.
Is there any way that a wine could ever detract from an experience in that the pairing is so bad you say, oh my god, I'm actually not
Am I allowed to
enjoying my
mention
dinner."
restaurants?
As long as it's not Yardbird.
A Chinese restaurant in a very nice hotel in Hong Kong had a beautiful steamed fish with a beautiful Napa Valley full-bodied red. I guess when you're looking at pairing Chinese food and wine together, and especially when you're looking at red wine, you have to consider whether or not the chef drinks, because the chef's writing the menu, the importer is displaying the wine. If the chef doesn't drink, how on earth will he know whether or not the food and the wine will pair together? And I think that, you know, when you're doing wine dinners with Chinese food, you do have one wine, one dish, one wine, one dish. And I would say it's a hard task at the best of times. But when you have a chef that doesn't drink, I'd say it was an impossible task. So, but you were saying about the sommelier's role in
Yeah,
in
exactly.
pairing wine
Isn't that
and
the
food.
sommelier's role to kind of mitigate that, chefs to the customer, and bringing that relationship together?
Well, there's a way to be safe, but also calculated and interesting with what you do. And in izakaya style dining, it's a lot like kind of dim sum, where food is just kind of coming out. And when I talked earlier about maybe a style of really general rule of like Japanese food and Italian food, there's a theme in a nation's cuisine somewhere. And if you can find wine that specifically will not kind of overpower anything in the dish, I think it's more important to have wines that will bring out highlights in all the various dishes that are going to hit the table, rather than have, I'd rather have something, the wine kind of not have any effect and the food pop out, or it'll be a nice match. But then there's certain wines that you can avoid depending on the cuisine on your list, where you just don't need to have them there. And I think that's hard, because I think a lot of people feel pressure as sommeliers, or as
As a customer, even.
yeah,
To,
if you need to order something, or this wine needs to be on the list, these guys need to be represented, but they don't.
Sure.
And you need to stick with your vision, I think, and
There's
just
that balance between catering to brands and to what customers want, and what you want to put forward as your concept.
Yeah.
For the dessert,
Yeah.
obviously something that's quite unusual, the wife cake. What have you decided on?
Personally, I went with a bruschetta, again Italian. I chose it. I've got to say, I mean, as my thoughts have been aired over the course of this conversation, exact pairings are a hard ask. But I went with the bruschetta because it's pretty much low alcohol. I like ending a meal with a lightly sparkling wine rather than beginning it with a champagne. I don't eat dessert personally, so whether or not the food pairing works, I couldn't care less. I like the wine. At the end of the day, I think that's you're there for pleasure. You're not there for analysis.
So you're saying that dessert doesn't bring pleasure, Ali?
Not in my world, but ask my wife. I think she'll answer a totally different way. For me, no. I like I've always appreciated good food, and for me, good food generally ends at the end of the last main course. And I apologise to any budding pastry chefs out there.
We'll be chatting at some stage to
You'll be
Greg
getting
wine.
hate mail, yeah.
So, you know, I went with the wine that I like, and it's because it's light, fresh, fruity. It's almost, in a way, if you're looking at it from a dining point of view, it's almost an alternative to dessert.
It is. It smells like strawberries.
It's a lovely wine. It's actually,
And it looks like strawberries.
we call it Wimbledon wine because it reminds you of being at Wimbledon watching tennis, eating strawberries. It's really quite remarkable, but it's a fantastic drop, and at 6.5% alcohol, it's really friendly to everybody at the end of the night. It just kind of cleans the palate and does its job properly. So.
Well, let's have a try.
Okay. Well, should we go to the goose first?
Oh, we need to have the goose
yes,
first.
we
Yeah,
haven't had the goose.
We
We haven't tried the goose, so I will do the honors again.
No, I was to understand that normally you have like somewhat of a plum sauce with the roast goose in Cantonese style. What sauce is on this?
This is actually the actual kind of gravy,
gravy?
from
Nice.
from this roasting process. So some people like plum sauce, some like just the gravy.
Yeah.
I personally don't like plum sauce because I find it very sugary and it doesn't actually add, because nowadays plum sauce usually isn't really plum. It's
Yeah.
just sugar and you know, it's like a artificial jam.
Yeah.
So, so I guess your pairing had that in mind?
Well, I
The
thought
plum
about
sauce
it,
in
yeah,
mind?
but I mean, regardless, it looks like
We were
pretty
chatting
tasty goose.
just before we went on air, and I was saying instead of the Italian, I was going to go with a sauterne, which was a French guy told me that actually yesterday. He said, "Oh, sauterne with Chinese roast goose is really a fantastic pairing." Now, if you're talking about the plum sauce, and if you're not adding the plum sauce, but you're drinking a sweet wine with the goose, you're basically taking away the artificial sugar and adding a natural sugar product together with it. And I'm sure that if plum sauce works with goose, then sauterne should work with goose. I say it's they're not cheap wines, and they're not ones to sit and drink in the middle of a meal. But I would like to think that the pairing would work quite well. It would be interesting to try.
A lot of our food comes with instructions, so you will drop a skewer that has a lemon and you serve it to the guests, and we go out of our way to tell them to squeeze the lemon on top. And if they don't, it changes their experience. Not only the food, but let alone the pairing. And so it's funny you say that. Depending on the final outlook of the dish, will definitely have a change on.
This is quite interesting because the one thing is that geese are quite greasy, and in fact they've got a lot of fat under the skin. And one thing that I find that I'm looking for right now is something to help me mitigate that. And they actually both do a really nice job of it. I think, personal preference, I prefer this one. I don't know which one that was. Yeah.
Narrowed out,
Yeah. So I think this has that slight sweetness that is kind of like a plum sauce, but not jammy and overdone. So yeah. Anyway, so next our wine cake.
Last, right.
Yeah.
I think I'm
Okay, you're gonna get some of this.
He's a dessert
That's the nerve,
guy.
Yeah. Here you go.
Thank you.
It does look
You can have a
Yeah. You try it?
Go for it.
What is actually winter melon is
Winter
actually
melon.
a fairly tasteless fruit.
It is. That's why they cook it with sugar, and it kind of gets into a paste-like
It's not sweet
texture.
at all.
Yeah. Just
And
barely.
it's not sweet at all, really. No.
Just barely.
Well, they cook it with sugar.
So this is Charles Smith. It's a Kung Fu grower raising from Columbia Valley, Washington State. I thought this would be cool because of its just super, super fresh. It's barely off dry, but it's really clean, really steely, and you could feel the weight of the dessert. Still a little bit there.
In my research, I was asking
Also
about
goes
the
very
wine,
well with the
about the
white
dish,
cake.
and I heard it was a very sweet dish, but actually,
It's actually
Yeah.
more just very pastry, lots of dough-like.
it reminds me of what's it, Lantern Festival? What's that?
Oh, mooncakes.
Mooncake style. of-
Well, mooncakes are
bang
very sweet because of the lotus seed. That would be a difficult one to pair, I reckon. People have tried to pair it with sauternes, but it's just like sweet on sweet.
There's two.
Yeah. So I think we both got about the same
Yeah.
dessert
Very,
style
very
of
well
wine.
done, gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed our show where we've matched some unusual wines with some even more unusual Cantonese dishes. Thank you, and we'll see you again soon.